Welcome to another mini episode of Relationscapes. I'm journalist Blair Hodges, joining you from Salt Lake City. And before we get to today's guest, I want to take a second to talk about a podcast that I think you might enjoy. I'm always on the lookout for podcasts that would resonate, especially diamond in the rough shows, ones that you might not have seen on the top 10 lists. Maybe they don't have the hugest audiences, but they're high quality, they're excellent shows, they're definitely worth our time. And today's recommended show that I'm going to tell you about is called We Are North Nashville. Here's the pitch. When people think about highways, we tend to think about possibilities. Where might these faster roads take us? Who will they connect us with? But it's also important to stop and think about how highways don't merely offer possibilities. They can also divide and even hurt the communities that they're routed through. And it's a common story in this country. For all of its benefits, the federal highway system was usually routed directly, often purposefully, through Black and brown neighborhoods. We Are North Nashville is a podcast that tells the story of how that played out in one particular community. On the heels of the civil rights movement, Tennessee started tearing up ground. They were using eminent domain to take homes from North Nashville families and demolish them to make space for the highway. Families fled and crime filled the void, but pieces of the community persisted. And these communities are still facing tremendous pressure as gentrification threatens to destroy what little is left of North Nashville's rich history. Simone Boyd is a neighborhood resident there, and she teamed up with journalist Andrea Tudhope to tell the story of 9 neighborhood elders who managed to persist through all the change. And I've enjoyed spending time with these elders on the podcast. There's Barbara Jean Watson. She was the first Black person to enroll at the previously all-white Jones School in North Nashville, and she can tell us all about how integration reshaped that neighborhood. There's Dr. Patricia Streeter Jackson, whose father was one of 2 African-American photographers in all of Nashville in the 50s and 60s, documenting the streets as the highways began to cut through them. You'll meet these and other people who have stories to tell that'll have you thinking more closely about your own neighborhood. You can listen to We Are North Nashville wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Stick around, and in a little bit I'll play the trailer for We Are North Nashville. But first, I'm happy to introduce today's mini-episode guest. It's Laura Pappano. You might remember her from a previous episode. She's an education reporter who joined us a while back to talk about the state of our nation's schools. And she's back with some updates and words of encouragement about how to navigate the current attacks on American education. And whether you have kids or not, the education system impacts everybody, because that's the place that so many citizens and immigrants are not only educated, but also socialized. So in other words, American schools are a major American culture factory, and this factory is in dire need of some safety inspections and upgrades. Laura Pappano, welcome back to Relationscapes.
Oh, thank you so much, Blair. Happy to be here.
It's good to talk to you again. Last time we spoke, we talked about your book, School Moms, Parent Activism, Partisan Politics, and the Battle for Public Education, and that battle continues. Trump has been reelected, and he has been getting involved with the Department of Education. So let's start there. What changes have you seen under a second Trump administration that's affecting the Department of Education?
Well, I think there are 2 pieces here. One is that the actual Department of Education, right, which has been essentially gutted, and also its priorities switched up and changed. We're no longer kind of guardians of students with special needs, students who need other support. Title IX has completely been interpreted in a different manner. And I think on the practical level, the Department of Education is not operating the way it was operated.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the main functions are just done, right? Because the Department of Education is supposed to help students with disabilities. It's supposed to help with funding in schools to help students with disabilities.
Title
I,
yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to protect students' rights, especially marginalized students' civil rights issues in schools. So you're saying like both of those things are just kind of donezo.
Well, there have been certain programs that have been, not funded or cut. And we're hearing about this, across the board in the government. And it's no surprise that this is happening in education as well. I mean, the impact is that overall, the federal government only supplies on average about 8% of school budgets. So dollar-wise, it's not the biggest chunk. But what it is, as I said, just a moment ago, they are the guardians. They are the ones who are the backstops. I mean, 2 years ago, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights was handling record numbers of cases and doing investigations because students were not being protected or treated well in certain places, and they were the ones who were digging in and approaching this issue. Now it is completely flipped. So I think that's the one thing. The second thing is, this affects the whole tone and tenor of kind of how schools operate. And, one thing I've always been concerned about is where you have places that just kind of preemptively don't want to get in trouble. So, when I was at the Moms for Liberty Summit in Orlando, and, I wrote about this for the Hechinger Report and for Slate. One of my big observations was, there's still a push to run for school board, but there's a new push to file lawsuits. And in one of the sessions, one of the very conservative far-right, lawyers was pointing out the power of, that even one suit can get people in other places to change policies to avoid themselves being named in a suit. So there's a kind of chill that comes with this kind of changed administration when we're talking about education and we're talking about protecting students.
And what do they want to sue over? So they're saying, let's initiate a bunch of lawsuits rather than run for school boards. What are they suing over?
Well, all kinds of things. So one suit, Supreme Court suit decided in June was based in, Maryland, and the premise was, there's a whole opt-out. Parents have the right to opt their students out. And
of particular
Moms for Liberty
lessons and material,
lessons, typically around LGBTQ materials. And so Moms for Liberty worked very hard to create, they have forms on their website for opting out. And what they effectively try to do is get lots of people to file opt-out things so that the school district is then in the position of having to keep track of like loads and loads of opt-outs. Well, what happens is, in this, particular case, they're like, this is too many, we can't do it. And it was that, refusal to opt out, which got the Supreme Court decision. And that has a big effect. There are also suits, there are suits around access to surveys. A lot of, the, youth risk survey, which is, it's anonymous, but it's students are taking, and it gives government gives people information about what we should be looking at and treating and focusing on. And that, is now something that potentially we're going to see suits over, because some parents want access to every single survey, or to opt themselves out of the survey, or get access to the surveys. And
so they want access to the individual surveys rather than, because are the broad survey results available right now? Like they're screening kids for mental and behavioral health things in schools.
I mean, that's the youth risk, that's still there, but I think there's an effort to just muck up the system, right? There's to file suits, that the suit that I'm thinking of is kind of in process, so we don't know what the outcome will be. It's often kind of framed as data about our students, our students being asked
that
about
seems reasonable, sure,
their mental health and their family relationships. And I think what, the larger piece of this is this question of, I think of it as kind of students' rights. When do students have the ability to think for themselves, to have space that is their own without intense parental oversight? I mean, I believe, and I raised my kids this way, that I, had tremendous influence over them, and I like to think I still do. But I saw my job as I'm sending them out into the world to negotiate it the best as they see fit.
And you're a supporter of them, not a controller of them.
Exactly. I don't want to. I don't want the job of, every moment being on their shoulder, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. And we're seeing a kind of debate in this country over, how much oversight, how much control, and for how long do parents have that control? And I think that's a really, I think it's a destructive kind of friction to have, because we want our kids to be able to grow up and to become themselves. Perhaps taking some scraps of what we try to teach them along the way, but we want them to be their own people because the challenges they will negotiate in the world are different than the challenges that we had to negotiate in the world. And I do worry that that some of these lawsuits and laws and rules and efforts are really focused on undermining that kind of developmental growth.
Okay. People that want to hear more about that and more about children's rights can check out my episode with Adam Benferrato, where we talk about his book about children's rights. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Let's talk about you at Moms for Liberty again. So when you wrote the book, you had gone to Moms for Liberty and attended. And then you just recently attended another conference there in Florida here in the past month or so, right? What differences did you see between the meeting you went to a couple of years ago versus the meeting that you saw now? Does the group seem to be growing? Is it shrinking? Are the ideas the same? What's happening there with Moms for Liberty?
So I've had the benefit of attending each one of the four
lucky
summits.
you.
And what I can tell you is that, as I wrote about in the book, the first time it was a revelation to the 500 moms that were there that these teachers that they could once, trust and rely on were in fact the enemy. I mean, this is what we were hearing is that the teachers were a source of danger and schools were threatening places, which is, just not. It doesn't jibe with reality.
Oh, they've all gone woke, Laura. I don't know what you mean. It's
and so it was one of these situations where parents were gasping. I mean, I sat behind somebody who was like, grabbing her head like in disbelief. Well, by the time I was at the one in Philadelphia, there were so many protesters there that people were told not to wear their Moms for Liberty lanyards on the streets for fear
because someone might yell at them or something.
Yeah, I mean, and there were police barricades everywhere, but people had bought in, and they were just there to kind of receive the next marching orders. And we saw last year in Washington, D.C., where Trump spoke, and that's where he uttered his famous phrase that, you send your kids to school and they come home 2 days later with an operation. It was a very much of a party atmosphere, right? It was, there's a cash bar. There are a lot of sequins. It was a very jubilant and packed place. This year they did it instead of at a city hotel, it was at a resort in Orlando. And had a much bigger ballroom. They could have fit like 800 people, but it was not. I think they got the same, number of people, 400 or 500 people. So it wasn't this giant spurt of growth as they had hoped, but we've seen their kind of influence wane a little bit, even if their kind of connections to conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation. So one of the leaders is now with Heritage Action. So is no longer kind of involved on a daily basis with Moms for Liberty. But what I saw there, of course, everyone had bought in. I mean, this is the Army. A lot more men, a lot of children. So there were the Leadership Institute, another conservative group that was founded in the 1970s, was holding kind of, I don't want to say camp, but it kind of seemed like camp for younger youth leadership. So you had kids there, you had homeschooled families. So there was a really concerted effort by Moms for Liberty to appeal to men and to include children. And what was interesting about the appeal to men is that there was a whole panel about, the role of, the father in the family is, this whole trope about the father's the defender of the family, which we're hearing more and more in conservative circles, and about, the kind of a push to return to traditional roles. And of course, the whole trad wife, you had Benny Johnson from the stage, saying how, right-wing moms are happier. And, how many trad wife moms do we have out there? So was a real push, and there was an interesting panel that I went to that was all kind of young influencers. And so there's a real effort to get these young conservatives, very religious, often male, but, trad wife women too, and to bring them into the fold of Moms for Liberty.
Does
and
it
this
seem to be
whole
successful?
conservative
Like,
movement.
you said the numbers are about the same, so it seems like there might have been less women than before. They kind of like filled it in with some extra people.
Yeah. Well, what I read it as is that Moms for Liberty is not the hot, sizzly thing that it was a couple years ago. And what they're trying to do is hang out with the cool kids, right? Because there is a lot of this very right-wing, very Christian, very, very conservative, traditional family kind of vibe. There's nothing wrong with traditional families. There's nothing wrong with Christianity. There's nothing wrong with any of this. But it's a particular political dog whistle of standing for certain things. And it does, even in some cases, flow over a little bit into anti-Semitism, racism, extremists you were seeing with, Nicholas Fuentes and that whole movement.
Yeah.
And that's creating some, friction for the Republican Party
Yeah.
and for people, even in the Moms for Liberty. I mean, there was a panel in which two very conservative allies of Moms for Liberty were debating whether or not white supremacists and and Nazi sympathizers belonged, in the room, in their party. And, so I think that that's something we're going to see more of, and that has impacts in schools and it has impacts in people's lives.
Okay, so it sounds like the enthusiasm kind of shrinking. They're trying to find ways to evolve so that they can stay relevant, and the jury is still out about how effective they will be. They're changing tactics from focusing on getting people elected on school boards, which I should say, by the way, I think almost all, if not almost all, of the Moms for Liberty endorsed candidates nationwide lost their school board elections.
Well, some won. I mean,
in uncontested races, I should say.
So what I will
the
say,
contested races they lost. If it was an uncontested race, they won, right? So we're not seeing success where they're being contested, right? So I see that sort of on the wane. It's still an issue. It's still a problem, and I don't want to get
a problem. That's exactly right, Blair.
And I don't want to get too optimistic, but we're coming off the tail end of a pretty impressive election here, where Democrats saw success across the board. There was definitely a blue shift all over in different places in the country. So where is your attention shifting to as a reporter, and what do you hope more people are looking at? If Moms for Liberty is still kind of humming along, but maybe isn't the biggest concern, what's the front burner issues when it comes to schools that you think people ought to be talking about right now?
Sure. So, a couple of things. One is I do think that their particular power is waning, but I think that there's a real battle right now. I was just spent Election Day in Idaho, in Kootenai County. And what you're seeing there is you're seeing a model that they're sharing with other places. There's apparently somebody who came in from Texas. There are people from other states that are coming to observe a tool for it's just an electoral tool. And what it is, it's a rating and vetting system. And what
the NRA does, where they're like, we're going to endorse you based on whether you fit these criteria.
Exactly. That's exactly what I saw. So, and what was surprising to me is that in a year when there's a lot of questions about, frankly, the far-right agenda in public schools has been extremely disruptive.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely disruptive. And you can see in Oklahoma, Ryan Walters is out.
Yeah, Ryan Walters
Lindell Fields is in.
He was the state...
He was the
superintendent of schools, right? He's the one who's like going to require people read the Bible in schools.
Bibles in every classroom, Bible in lessons in,
Ten
grades
Commandments
5, 12.
everywhere.
Their state was the one that was going to require woke teachers, I put that in quotes, from places like New York and California to take a
test, a loyalty test, basically,
created by PragerU.
And he's out.
So right now, all of that stuff is being reviewed by the new temporary superintendent of instruction.
Okay.
What's interesting to me is that this spring he has said he will not run for that post. So it'll be
So it's
very
wide open.
interesting this spring to see what happens.
See, but what a waste of time, though. They're not talking about improving math scores or getting kids more interested in reading or developing internet literacy. And I know that's happening in schools. There are teachers that are still persisting in doing their jobs. But what we're not seeing is leadership is wasting their time on these fake issues about being woke and, like, I don't know, caring about other people, which is really about classroom management and trying to have people get along so they can learn.
No, exactly. I mean, I was arguing, not arguing. I was raising the question with one far right candidate's campaign manager, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" SEL is social emotional learning.
Yeah, we talked about it in our episode. People should go back and check our last interview.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So
what did he say when you asked him?
Oh, when I asked him, he went around. I said, "You were in the Army. Isn't this kind of like the military, where you get everyone on the same page so they can work together?" And he says, "Well, we don't know what it is, but we don't like it." So I think that's the sort of thing that we're dealing with. One place of concern, and I'll get back to the rating and vetting in just a second.
Yeah.
But to stick with Ryan Walters for a minute, he was at the Moms for Liberty on a panel where they were creating they created this Teacher Freedom Alliance.
He's the Oklahoma
want to
guy.
destroy public teacher unions and, offer an alternative. And one of the things that I don't know how it's going to go, but one of my concerns is that just as they have divided parents and school boards, are we now seeing a push to divide teachers? And because it's been like teachers
set up
have
factions of teachers.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going to come of that, if it will even be effective, but I'm paying attention to it.
Okay.
The rating and vetting thing is interesting to me because what I saw was in this one particular race in the Lakeland Joint School District, which is kind of outside of Coeur d'Alene, I saw a fantastic mom of 2 kids, very involved in the schools, volunteers. She and her husband own 2 pizza restaurants, and
delicious.
They are big boosters for the school system. They donate, they employ, kids at the pizza place. And she was running against someone who the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee, this kind of extremist group, which is the official Republican Party group, had picked a guy a retiree who had just moved across state lines from Washington into Idaho, no connection with schools. And I met him on election day outside the, Hayden Lake Fire Department, which was the polling station, under a tent with a concealed handgun in his waist.
Oh, good.
And I asked him kind of how he got into the race, and he, conceded that. He said, I'd never thought of running for this until somebody approached me and asked me to run.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what are your goals? And his goals were, he wants to see creationism taught because evolution is just a theory.
And the Earth is only 6,000 years old, sure.
And he sees one of his main jobs is to protect children from atheism and satanic forces.
Okay, so this is just a Christian fundamentalist that wants to
and he won.
Back to the Scopes monkey trial. Oh, good. Did he win decisively, or was it close?
It was close-ish.
Do you think people are paying attention, though? Like, is this a race where people... How do we stop this from happening, I guess? Like, to me, all those things are non-starters. I think if you required, and I don't think we should, right? But if you required everyone to vote, every parent of kids in schools, I don't think that guy wins.
I agree with you. I'm not sure he wins, but, I was out there on a cold, rainy, those bone-chilling rainy days and watching how organized the KCRCC were with their people, with their cards. I saw people walking in and out of the polls with their cards, with the rated and vetted candidates.
Okay.
And we
should do something like that. We need to have volunteer groups. Or just make it such a red badge of shame. Just that you could be like, oh, if they're endorsed, that's the wrong person. Like, let that do the vetting.
I think some people, I heard that some people do take those to the polls and vote for the opposite people. But
Yeah.
I mean, what it tells you is that, and these are all Republicans running, by the way, all conservative Republicans who are Christian.
Yeah.
So it's not as if, it's not as if they're ideologically in different universes. They just have a different way of expressing their beliefs and practicing them. So I think what I was kind of surprised is that they rated and vetted school board candidates. They are rating, last spring they rated and vetted library board people. What we're seeing is a pattern of a battle on every front.
So it's not that they're giving up totally on school boards. They're still going to be pursuing that, but they're adding an arm of, let's get more lawsuits going as well.
Yes.
And they have a friendly Supreme Court, so that's not great.
Well, that's one of their points, is that it's a very friendly environment for them. So all I'm saying is that it feels good, it feels hopeful when, when you have down in, Houston, some kind of extremist school board people getting, losing to moderate people who don't want to do book banning, curriculum reviews. I mean, the thing is, these things have consequences.
Yeah.
I was at a coffee shop the day, I think maybe it was on election day, talking with a teacher who had quit. And because I said, what are the impacts of kind of these extreme policies in this, in your classroom? What's the effect of this? It's not just happening kind of at 50,000 feet. And she said, well, there's a curriculum review policy that every single book, item, any video that's longer than, I don't know, 5 minutes or, has to be reviewed by the committee. And the committee, the school board has to look at all this stuff, and they take forever to get back.
Yeah, that
it's
makes
not
teaching
efficient.
impossible.
And she said, she was a drama teacher, and she was doing a Grimm's fairy tale, extravaganza play, and it got shut down. And so for 5 weeks, she said, we had study hall.
Fun.
She could not teach. And, and then and then students had come to her separately and said, we really want to have a knitting club. So she started filling out paperwork and this was after school or at recess. They put so many barriers up that she just threw up her hands.
It's not worth it.
So that, what we're describing changes the experience of school for students.
Yeah. Well, what is making you hopeful right now? Where are you putting your energy? Where do you think people should be putting their energy in this moment? We'll end with that.
Okay. Well, where do I feel hopeful? I feel hopeful that people are paying attention and that there are organized moms and people. I mean, I was there on election day with a mom who had at one time homeschooled 7 children and now is a public school advocate, who had worked really hard to organize people and get a levy passed when it looked to be threatened, more than a year ago, and has gotten very, very involved and has a whole network of people who are involved. I also take hope from, there are a lot of moderate Republicans in this area who are banding together and they're like, we're going to take this party back from the extremists. Let's see if they're successful. I mean, good luck to them, because that's why I see hopeful is that people saying, wait a second, this is not okay. And I think, when I reflect on what we saw on election day, I think that there's been enough kind of harm done that people are just throwing up their arms and saying enough. And it's not like the frog in the boiling water, because it's too much. It is way too much.
Too much, too soon, too fast. Yeah. I would also ask then, and I know you're a reporter, so you're really focusing on what is happening and you're not trying to be a prognosticator, but do you see the Department of Education coming back? If Democrats come back into power, do you see a reform and a restructuring and a rebuilding there to make it back to what it was and possibly even maybe something better?
I mean, the Department of Education, before it was created, I mean, if you go way, 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 way back, I mean, its role was, data collection and sharing so that people could understand what was happening in other places. I think that is incredibly valuable as we try to, double down and actually improve student performance. So do I think the Department of Education is going to come back? I mean, I think that it has become enough of a political issue that I would not be surprised if there were a move, if the administration changed to a Democratic administration. I would not be surprised if there weren't an effort to kind of make it a useful support tool. I mean, that's what it is. It's a support organization. It's a part of government. But, it has really important functions for, as we talked about at the top, underserved, low income, special needs. I mean, people that need to make sure that their local districts and schools are serving them. They deserve to be educated as much as the next person.
See, and if we build it back, we need to do it in such a way that will restore confidence so that people will even want to work there, knowing that a president can't just come in and unilaterally destroy congressionally built agencies like that. So there's a lot of work ahead if progressives and liberals, want to make a dent in it. All right, well, I encourage people to follow your work, Laura. You've been reporting out in Slate and other places. Your recent article about Moms for Liberty. You have a great article about school vouchers that I think people should check out. And then, of course, your book is called School Moms, Parent Activism, Partisan Politics, and the Battle for Public Education. And Laura, thanks for checking back in with us and kind of giving us a lay of the land. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Blair.
Thanks for listening to another mini episode of Relationscapes. Thanks to Laura Pappano for joining us again. I linked her recent articles in the show notes if you want to check those out. And as promised, here is the trailer for the podcast I recommend in this episode. It's called We Are North Nashville. And we'll see you again on Relationscapes.
They came in, they told me one day, they said, "You will not believe what they are going to do to North Nashville."
I remember white men coming and pounding a red and white stake where I live, and measurements were taken.
All the houses, they were all torn down.
They were all gone. It changed everything.
A highway ripped through the heart of this historically Black neighborhood, but the community's elders stood their ground.
There are some of us, we stayed in the hood.
Because this is home. The North Nashville before the interstate, before urban renewal, integration, gentrification, this North Nashville lives in these elders.
This is their story.
I'm Andrea Tedhope.
And I'm Simone Boyd.
And we're the hosts of the podcast We Are North Nashville.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.